because you're worthy to be praised. We lift you up and magnify your name, because there is none like you, Lord. In your Son, Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Y'all must have been praying with me, because I got through pretty quick. At this time, we're going to call
one of the people that I met with early on, and you know, getting Bobby's support's not, you just don't walk in there and get it, you got to earn it. She gave me several warnings of what would happen to me if I didn't continue to earn it. So I think about that often, and I hope I will always do that. And having someone like Bobby in the county commissioner, mayor of Lewisville for several times, is just an inspiration in public service. We appreciate all the public servants here. I'm going to bring up, while somebody figures out how to get this up here, if somebody knows how to do it. I don't know how to do it. You should have. I don't know why it's not working.
Turn your computer on.
Somebody will come figure it out. But while they're doing that, one of the honors that I had this session, I got a call from a lady that said, Ron, you know, would you possibly be interested in considering serving on a board with other representatives that will discuss legislation from a conservative standpoint and represent conservatives down in the legislature. And of course, I was honored to be even considered for that. And also, this lady turned out to be the chairperson for one of the committees I served on as well. And before I went to my first meeting, I can't tell you how many people came up to me that were in other legislatures and says, you will not have a better committee chairperson than Geanie Morrison. And it turned out to be that way. Elections committee is the governor, as the governor's office called me and reminded me, as soon as I got appointed, that this is not a bipartisan committee. Although you still need to conduct yourself as much as you can in a manner that serves all of Texas. And that's what Geanie did. Even on things that she disagreed with, she allowed everyone to present their point. We had some controversial subjects that came up in there. So she has just been someone that I've learned to respect, learned to admire, and hopefully can emulate in some way. But she's the board chairman of the Texas Conservative Coalition, and she's going to speak a few words to us tonight. Come on, Geanie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Ron. I want to tell you a little bit about the Texas Conservative Coalition. I'm Geanie Morrison. I am from House District 30, which is down in Victoria, Texas, is my home, and I have 6 counties surrounding that. Victoria County, and then DeWitt, Jackson, I'm sorry, I don't have Jackson. DeWitt, Refugio, Goliad, Aransas, and Calhoun counties. And that is the area that I represent now. After redistricting, I had other counties, and as you know, things change. Love my district, and I have been in the Texas House since my first session was in '99. So I just finished my 8th legislative session. And every session is different. Of course, this session was very different because we had 43 incoming freshmen. And when you took our freshmen and then also the members from the last legislative session, almost half, if not a little more, were freshmen or sophomores. And so we had a great new group coming in, which is wonderful to have new blood, but it's also some challenges too, as you know, Jim, how that goes. But we had a great group, and I can tell you that you had one of the outstanding stars in the Texas legislature coming in as a freshman. Ron has done an excellent, excellent job. And the Texas Conservative Coalition, which I'm chairing right now, is a group of like-minded individuals that are looking at conservative legislation. And we look throughout the interim and look at what the Texas Conservative Coalition is all about. And we have principles that we look at, and I'm going to state those to you in a minute. But I want to just tell you a little about what we've done and what we have accomplished. We have a board of 15 members, and Ron is one of 2 freshmen, so that shows you what a great job he's done as far as presenting himself to be a good conservative member. We have an executive director and 3 staff members that run the Texas Conservative Coalition, and they were going to be here this evening to do a PowerPoint presentation for you and talk to you. But as you know, there are always glitches, and in Austin, Texas, Southwest had a delay of their flight, and they were not going to actually arrive at Love Field until like 6:15, so by the time they got here, you would be ready to go home. And so I'm going to wing it for you and just tell you some of the things that we did. And, oh good, we got that, great, that's wonderful. And so I'm going to go through the PowerPoint for you and just explain to you briefly what the Texas Conservative Coalition is and how we accomplish things. So here is some of the things down the road. And I want to tell you too, what we do is we do policy summaries and analysis of bills. And that is one, I think, the biggest contributions of the Conservative Coalition. During the legislative session, we have a group that goes in and every bill that we have that we actually vote on the floor, we put out an overview of it. And it gives we look at the principles of the Conservative Coalition and then grade each bill on those principles, whether to support it, to oppose it, or just inform. And it gives the reasons why. And so that is one of the things during the legislative session that the Conservative Coalition does. And we had a lot of good victories during 2003. We also have Courageous Conservative Awards that I'll talk to you a little bit later too, of members that are outstanding conservatives, and there's a scorecard that goes out and looks at conservative legislation by those principles and then ranks members that you can see also on the Conservative Coalition website. And then what we do during the interim is we look at things that we'll be studying during the interim for the next legislative session and hold town hall meetings such as this so that members can talk to the constituents and get input on the past legislative session and issues that they want to address the next time. And so some of the things that we really were our conservative victories were rejection of the Medicaid expansion. That was something that was a very hard-fought fight. We had a lot of bills that were trying to expand Medicaid. We all know that what an issue we have with what's going on with the Affordable Health Care Act is getting ready to be implemented in the next couple of weeks. And so that was one of the big victories we had, was rejecting that expansion. We also upheld Second Amendment rights, and that is very important, is upholding those. And also reforming public education. You all know that we had a lot of public education issues, and we looked at public education, and it took a lot of time, and there were a lot of changes. We heard from the constituents, we knew that there were issues, and so there were a lot of things that were studied and were looked at. We also had pro-life issues, but let's go to rejecting Medicaid first. In rejecting the Medicaid expansion, there were some paths that were gone down that were definitely failed paths. We also were looking at the federal matching funds that were available. And even though you would get matching funds, Texas cannot afford to expand, because if you look at what happens to the states as you go down that line, what's going to happen in the out years of expansion and what it's going to cost the state of Texas. The states need to have meaningful flexibility to be able to address healthcare issues that we need for each state, and to be able to do that state by state and not take a one-size-fits-all. And we also looked at the numbers, and there was even an article in the American Statesman today that talked about some companies that had looked at what it would do with their employees, but also some nonprofit groups that are looking at trying to help the uninsured. And when they went through the criteria and looked at what the criteria was, very few of the uninsured would actually qualify to have health insurance. And so what is touted out there is going to solve all of the uninsured issues is not going to happen. And also looking at this expansion was going to lower reimbursements to doctors. And actually we voted, the Texas House voted 3 times to reject Medicaid expansion. And here they are. We voted 3 times against it. We removed a budget amendment that was going to expand it. We also prohibited expansion in Senate Bill 7 by an amendment. And also, there was a motion to instruct the budget conferees that was voted on that said, we will not tolerate you coming back with expansion of Medicaid when you go and work on the budget in conference. If you bring it back to us, we will vote against it. So the Texas House voted 3 times not to expand Medicaid. Let's move on to upholding the Second Amendment rights. If you look at all the bills that were presented, and I know there were a lot of concealed handgun license bills and some that a lot of us would have liked to have seen passed also. But if you look at the ones that were passed, there were 2 that were passed. Senate Bill 864 and House Bill 48. And one of the bills says that it reduced the number of hours that you had to take to actually have your concealed handgun license, so it was not so burdensome. The other issue was whenever you are carrying your gun with you or in the car, there were always issues of whether you were supposed to display it or not display it. And this bill went in and took care of that and said very frankly what you can and cannot do, because there were a lot of people that were even looking at not having a concealed handgun license because of the issue of being in their vehicle being stopped and it being concealed or not concealed, because it was very unclear, and these cleared these up. And also, it empowered the Attorney General in Senate Bill 987 to defend gun shows, and it empowered the Attorney General to work on that. And also, this was the one about storing a firearm in a locked vehicle at a college, Senate Bill 1907, that if a student does have a firearm stored in their vehicle on a college, that is not unlawful. And so those are several of the Second Amendment rights that the Conservative Coalition helped pass. Going to reforming public education. When we were looking at all the public education reforms, you know, once again, we have a lawsuit, as you all know, that are in education, and we follow what's going on, which has happened over and over to Texas. And we still have a pending lawsuit that has not been decided. But one of the major issues that was heard from parents and educators was that we were testing too much. There were too many tests, too many times. And so House Bill 5, the Omnibus Education Bill, reduced the testing, the amount of testing, and also the amount of the end-of-course exams, how much they counted for your final grade. And so that was heard loud and clear. And also, there was reform and increasing of charter schools. We had a set number of how many charter schools we could have, and so that was expanded, and that was in Senate Bill 2. And so there could be more charter schools because there are more and more parents and more students that want to be able to have an opportunity to go to a charter school if they have a failing school. Also, there are, if you look at the statistics, 100,000 children are currently on waiting lists. And so that means that there are more parents and more students that want to have an alternative to an education. And so that expanded that students could have more charter schools coming. We also expanded the virtual learning, House Bill 1926. And so basically what this bill says is that there is not a limit on how many classes of virtual learning can be offered or a student can take. In the past, there was an amount that the Commissioner of Education could limit it to. But there are so many instances where there are classes that students need to take. There may not be a teacher in that particular program or that particular degree program that has that subject content. And so you can do virtual schools and have a student take a class. Or if they're on a progressive time frame, they want to take additional classes. And so this was a good bill to help expand virtual learning, House Bill 1926. If you go to the Protecting Life, which was a huge issue. Yes, sir.
Why did you include CISO in that last
I'm going by the PowerPoint that was given to me today, and that'll be something that can be discussed when that comes up in a little bit for your questions and answers. protecting life. House Bill 2, which as you know, was what we worked on in our second legislative session. What House Bill 2 basically did was it banned abortions past 20 weeks because of the fetal pain issue. And I've never seen so many people, and I'm sure that those here in this room were there too. I've never seen so many people at the Capitol on both sides of the issue, but people coming to express their opinions. And this was a very important piece of legislation to make sure that, because also in our Texas House, we have several doctors in the Texas House. And when you have a neurologist that is talking to you and deals with neurology every day, that is telling you, yes, absolutely, those babies feel pain after 20 weeks, that was something that was definitely something that we felt like needed to be addressed and was addressed. It also, House Bill 2 also increased abortion facility standards to an ambulatory center, which is basically just making sure that if a woman chooses to have an abortion, that it is safe and secure. And also put on the drug that induces abortion, that the FDA standards had to be carried through, because that was not being done. And so that was something that was also in House Bill 2. Other conservative victories that we had, $1 billion in tax relief. We expanded the exemption to small businesses that was going to expire, and that was expanded. Drug testing for unemployment benefits. If someone comes in for unemployment benefits, they have to be drug tested, which I think is a good plus for employees. We also increased government transparency and accountability. There were several bills that increased transparency, but one of the ones was whenever there is a school district bond proposition or in city and county government, if you're going to be voting for a tax increase, we have now that there has to be more visible to where you can see actually on the ballot and information to say exactly what you're voting for, and so people know what they're voting for. And I think that's a very positive, and I think that's great for all elected officials, because you don't want anyone to not know what they're voting on and what you're voting on. And also in economic freedom, we rejected new occupational licensing. We are over-licensing so much. If you go out and talk to people, there are so many jobs in the state. Texas is doing so well. Our problem is now that we have people that would like to work, but there are so many restrictions and so many licenses in some of the professions, it's very hard to do that. And so that was one of the things that was other big win, was rejecting so much more bureaucracy and red tape for someone to get a job. This is just a very brief overview of what the Texas Conservative Coalition worked on. You can go to the website and look up what is going on and what we did, the accomplishments for this last legislative session. But also you'll be able to see, we will start having task force meetings. We also have the Texas Conservative Coalition Research Institute. And what that institute does during the interim is it goes in and researches issues that were not accomplished this legislative session, or issues that we already know for the next legislative session that need to be looked at. And so you are welcome to go look at that webpage, send in comments and concerns to Ron and to the Texas Conservative Coalition, because there will be those interim studies done during the interim in between sessions, getting ready for the next legislative session. And so that is what the Texas Conservative Coalition does. But one of the major reasons I'm here tonight is I want to present a special award to Ron. And Ron, if you'll come up. And I'm sorry with our executive director not being able to get here yet with me. I should have driven it with me, but we do have a special award. And what this is Ron scored a very high score on looking at what the issues were to be addressed by the Conservative Coalition. And so Ron is being presented the Courageous Conservative Award, and you can be here. There are very few House members that are in this category of a good voting record. And as you know, you can go online and look and see what he did, and you can be very proud of what he did. But I also want to tell you that just serving with him on the Texas floor of the House, and also having him serve on my elections committee, he's been an outstanding member, and he is going to be a leader in the Texas legislature, I assure you. So, Ron, it is great to be here, and congratulations to you for a great job.
Coming up, Victoria is a long way. And I remember, Jeanie, a few years ago, it snowed on Christmas in Victoria. That was an unusual thing, but thank you very much, and it was an honor for me to serve with Jeanie and be a part of the Texas Conservative Coalition. They really do a good job of analyzing those bills. We voted on over 1,600 bills, if you can imagine, although there were 3,700 filed or some number like that. So that's a lot of information to have to put out. Now, I want to bring up now, when I decided to run for office, my consultant that I used, Kevin Brannon, who is here tonight as well, said, well, you need to go talk to this gentleman, because if you can kind of help pass his test, and that'll make me a little bit more comfortable with you running. And he also is a true conservative, somebody that's represented a portion of Denton County now for the last 4 terms, the last 8 years, is served as chairman of the Criminal Justice Committee this past year, this past session, serving that right now. And I've asked him to speak for just a few minutes. If you help me welcome Representative Tan Parker.
Well, it is a tremendous privilege for me to be here tonight, and I really wanted to come just to talk about Ron and the job that he's done for Denton County and for the state. And I'm so incredibly proud from what he just referenced. I didn't know Ron when he first decided to make the plunge, as we call it, into elected life and to put himself out there to campaign. And I couldn't have been more impressed in my first meetings and getting to know him over the course of many, many months. And then to see him in action was just extraordinary during the session. You all should be incredibly proud. It's very rare that a freshman member makes an impact in so many ways as Ron did during his very first session. Doesn't matter whether or not we're talking about the appropriations process, in which he played an amazing role. Here he wasn't a member of the appropriations committee, but guess what? He probably had the best attendance record, better than anyone that actually was selected to serve on that committee. He was there every day, which is purely a voluntary deal, that you would sit there every day in every appropriations hearing and take copious notes on everything that was happening in the budget. Extraordinary. There's not a better way to learn. And people, members all across the chamber would come to me and go, my goodness, what an extraordinary experience to see someone care so much about the issue that you would sit there every day and study these issues on appropriations. Then, when it came to the water debate, Ron obviously referenced here in appropriations a lot of his great historical career experience in financial services. He did the same thing in leveraging that great background specifically to the water debate. The big discussion around how we finance the future of water and whether or not we could do it in a way that made economic sense. Then on the topic of transportation, I mean, as you all know, we had 4.5 months of a regular session. Then we had special session 1 in June, special session 2 in July, and special session 3 in September. And would you know, it's again extraordinary that here on this final bill, in the third called special session on transportation, it was Ron that carried a major amendment on the topic as a freshman. So what I want you all to know is that, one, I couldn't be more proud of him. He's one of my closest friends in the world. He's done an extraordinary job representing conservative values, all of us, our families, our businesses, our way of life here in North Texas, and I couldn't be more thrilled. Let me give just a couple of the brief stories really quickly. I went and had a bill of mine before the Public Safety Committee. This is probably in the month of March. So we're now just a few months in. And it was an early morning hearing. And I'll never forget it because the chairman of this particular committee had a rotational program where every member got the chance to actually be chairman of that committee for a day, if that makes sense. And as a chairman of the corrections committee, you're always trying to empower your members. So I applaud that chairman for doing it. Well, sure enough, the day that I came to lay out a bill, Ron was the chairman of this committee. And here he had been, a member for now, all of 8 weeks at that point. And I'll never forget the way he ran that process, how professional he was. And everyone around me, including my chief of staff and myself, we all heard the same thing. He looks like a 20-year veteran. He had control of the process. He ran it efficiently and beautifully, gave everybody the opportunity to speak, and was extraordinary. And the other thing I'll share with you, at the end of the day, we are conservatives, and we are passionate about what we do. Representative Fallon, Representative Morrison, Representative Simmons, and myself. And at the same time, we recognize it's important in order to get things done that you've got to have some kind of degree of cooperative working relationship with Democrats on the other side of the aisle. It's important to Texas. It's important to this country for us to continue to be viable and healthy for decades to come as a nation, as a state. And so his leadership in that regard within this freshman caucus, you heard how large it was that he was instrumental in putting in place, if you will, what he referred to, he'll tell you more about this in question and answer here this evening, Purple Tie Thursdays. So not red, not blue, the freshman class will try to work together to address some of these issues. Never sacrificing core values or principles, but being amicable with people on the other side of the aisle to do things in the best interest of Texas and ultimately in the best interest of this country. So again, it's an extraordinary privilege and honor for me to be here tonight and to have the chance to talk about Ron for a moment. I think without question, my dear friend Representative Morrison summed it up very, very well, that you will see Ron not years from now, but in the very near future, assume more and more significant leadership responsibilities in the state of Texas. And so we all can be very, very proud of that. Again, Ron, thank you for allowing me to be here for a couple of minutes and just let folks know what a great job you did. Thank you very much.
Obviously, if I can grow into the type of legislative leader and statesman that Tan Parker is, I will have accomplished something. And like my forerunner for all of Denton County, Jim Horn, who set a pretty high bar for us, no question about it. But it is an honor to serve, and we're going to go through some things now. I've got a presentation here that I believe is going to work well. But before we get going to the presentation, I want to have my staff and my family come up here. I don't have everybody here, but come on up. I want to introduce everybody real quick. All right, let's keep moving in this direction. Haley, come on up. Let's go. There we go. And most of you have already met my beautiful child bride of 33 years, Lisa. I was born in Louisiana, raised in Arkansas, so we get married early so the cousins don't get away. So we got, Lisa and I have been married 33 years, and one of our children are here. Daniel is here, and Daniel's our second son, and 28 years old, and he recently married Aubrey. Aubrey also serves as an intern in our district office, and the definition of intern means work twice as hard, get no pay. So we're excited to have her be a part of that. Our oldest son, Justin, is not here tonight. He has started law school, so he's doing that. He's married as well, has our grandchild, so they're our favorite for sure, and another one on the way. So Amy's going to have our second one in December. And then our baby, Allie Beth, is a senior at Furman University in Greenville, South Carolina. So we're kind of going through the process. And then our staff, Chief of Staff, Ben Lancaster. Ben is from Highland Village. He's from the area. Actually lives one street into Tan Parker's district, so he's well represented. He worked for Tan for a little while, so Tan had him on his team for a while, but Ben works as my legislative director. Our Chief of Staff, Eric Stratton, actually moved over to the Health and Human Services Department. It was a promotion for him. Great to have him, but it's great for him and his family. And Ben will be our Chief of Staff now, so we're excited to have Ben. And then Haley Orr is also an intern. She is a student at University of Texas, Dallas. and is from the Lake Jackson area, right down in South Texas, where Dennis Bauman is the representative down there, and she's been a great help. Appreciate her so much. She helped on the campaign a little bit as well. And then most of you know Mark Yarborough. You've known him longer than you have me, and Mark obviously helped my credibility by being able to have him come on board. He's our district director, so he's the person locally in our office, which is just in far North Carrollton, easy to get there from anywhere in the district. One of the great things about the district is from end to end, it's less than 20 miles, so it's great to be able to get around. But Mark's doing a great job for us. We appreciate him. He knows the area well, lived here pretty much all his life, so we appreciate that. So give these folks a great hand. All right. I'm going to go through some slides. Some of it will actually, Geanie's gone over, so I'm not going to go over some of the details, but maybe a little bit different take on a few of those things. So if we can have the next slide, please. You know, one of the great things that we have to do in Texas is we have to balance our budget. Now, we could balance it by having more taxes, but obviously what we want to make sure that doesn't happen unless it's something that is totally unavoidable. What we did pass a balanced budget this time with no new taxes. I voted in favor of the budget as it left the House of Representatives. When it came back from the Senate and the conference committee, I voted against it. And the reason I did that was as much about the process as it was about the product. I believe that there needs to be more time for discussion and more openness when it comes back, rather than just saying, hey, vote on this, yes or no. All right, because if you put me in the corner and you tell me yes or no, I'm most of the time going to say no. And so we're thinking about that process. I think it'll get better over time. But there were a lot of good things in the budget. And again, I voted for it as it left the House. We were able to do over $1 billion in tax relief for small businesses, $500 million to strengthen the teacher retirement system that we needed to do. First time we've done a cost of living adjustment, a very small one. Most of them are less than $100, but for people that retired before 2004, that's a promise made, so it's a promise kept. We have to do that. Promises made or promises kept. Now, if you want to look at something different in the future, you can do that. But for the people that we promised, we need to make sure we fulfill those promises, and we're going to do that. $92 million for additional border security through the committee that I was a part of as well, and increased funds for women's health program, which Geanie talked about, and we're going to talk about a little bit more. So next slide, please. Truth in budgeting laws. You know, one of the things that I talked about in the campaign is that the Texas process has been to be able to say, we've got this money sitting in this account over here, so we're not going to use it, so we'll be able to say that we're balancing the budget over here. And it's been going on that way for quite some time. And it's not illegal, but it's not proper accounting procedure. So there was a bill passed this year, HB 6, that was introduced by John Otto, that began reducing the reliance on these dedicated funds. Like, for example, we would take sales taxes off sporting goods, which were supposed to be used for the parks, but we couldn't spend them because we need to use it to balance the budget. Well, that's just crazy, right? So we began unwinding that, and one of the things that a group of us met with them on is, okay, let's have a definition of when we're going to get to that number to zero. So we think over the next few sessions, we'll be able to get it to where there are no dedicated funds that aren't used for their dedicated purpose. So that's a big, big plus right there. That means we had to reduce the budget someplace else. HB 7, what this allowed us to do was to set up a process to review the use of dedicated funds. We have tens, and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars that are in these accounts for dedicated purposes that we haven't used. And we need to figure out either we need to use them or we need to quit collecting the fee, right? Or quit collecting tax. And so that's what we got going this time. And we did that. In fact, the system benefit fund that all of us have been paying money to out of our electric bill, that's over. Okay, that's going to be a $292 billion in tax relief. It's going to come back on that. And so that's just something that makes sense to do. And so we've done some of those things. We need to do more, but we had a good start in truth in budgeting. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at how our money's spent in the general revenue, when I talk about general revenue, what I'm talking about is state money. All right? There's really two types of money. There's state money and federal money. In every state, it works like that. Our state spends of the money that you and I pay at the state level, over half of that goes to education. So a big part of our budget is education. And we want to make sure that we fund education appropriately, but the amount of money isn't the only appropriate thing that goes with funding education. It's making sure that the money's going to the right places, not just going without any accountability attached to it. And we need to work with the local school districts on what are the right types of accountability to make sure that they are utilizing your dollars for the benefit of your children and grandchildren. We need to make sure of that. Then we spend 32% on health and human services, which would be like Medicaid and other things like that that we have to help support. And some of those programs are absolutely vital. Some of them we need to make sure that that money is being used appropriately. So most of our money, state money, 88% is spent in those two areas. So if you're going to look at budget changing, those are the two main areas that you need to look at. Next slide, please. Now, when you combine all funds, because the federal government kicks in a lot of money on health and human services, it comes down to we're spending about the same money overall when you look at the federal funds on education and health and human services. So the two big items of our budget, 85% of the money that we talk about in the legislature is spent on those two items. So those are big, big issues that we have to be willing to address, and we have to be willing to make proper decisions. And it doesn't mean those are always easy decisions, but we need to be able to make those tough decisions. And one of the things about the rejecting of Obamacare, which I supported, you might be on a different side of that, I respect that, is because while they say they're going to give us all the money funded by the federal government, which, by the way, is still funded by you and me. In case, I don't know that they believe that we understand that, but we do. At the end of the day, in a few years, we'd have to take on more and more of the responsibility, and we wouldn't be able to change any of the benefits. So Texas has been the leader in saying, hey, we are not going to do that. In fact, the governor just filed for a waiver to allow us to make our own decisions on how Medicaid operates and what have you. So I stood behind that. I believed in that. And hopefully we'll be able to get some things done in Washington to make it even better for us to be able to stand on our own. Next slide, please. Education reform, Geanie touched on that, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. Just a couple of things that I thought were interesting is we did put C-Scope under the State Board of Education. Now, there's been controversy over that, but that's the first time that that's happened. Actually, the C-Scope people that were behind that, they really misrepresented to us because they said, okay, we're going to remove them out of the public domain because it was the private lesson plans. Well, then we found out some school systems were still using them, and they say, well, that was already in the public domain, so there's nothing we can do about it. But at least we have them under scrutiny. So when you vote for your State Board of Education person, make sure that person has your values, okay? And I think the one representing this area certainly does, but we need to pay attention. That's a very, very important elected position, State Board of Education. Yes.
Explain what C-SCOPE is.
Yeah, C-Scope, what happened is especially in Texas where there's a lot, it's not so much, LISD doesn't fall into that. Neither would Carrollton Farmers Branch because they're a big school district. But in small school districts where they may not have the ability to develop the curriculum that they need, they can go pull it online and utilize that curriculum. The problem was the state of Texas wasn't overseeing that curriculum. We oversee curriculum that LISD does and Carrollton Farmers Branch does, but we didn't have enough oversight in that curriculum. And so that's what's being changed, and hopefully that will get to the better. In fact, a lot of us would have no problem with eliminating C-Scope altogether.
Can you tell us the link between Competent Core and C-SCOPE?
Well, no, although they may in some ways go together, it's a different program. Common Core, which is the next thing we're going to talk about as well, is that I thought we had it over here. Yeah, Common Core. So we eliminate Common Core standard and curriculum. You know, Obama administration wants to be able to establish how we teach our children. All right, and we're saying that we're the state of Texas. We still believe in the 10th Amendment. And that we passed law to eliminate Common Core curriculum standards in the state of Texas. Okay? Now, there is some carryover there between those two, but they were developed by separate organizations. Charter schools, we talked about that. As you saw in the last slide, 100,000 people are on the charter school wait list. We tried to lift the cap totally off, but we couldn't get there, but we did make some good progress. And you know, one of the things, just kind of a side note for a minute, when I counted the real hard, what I would consider hardcore conservatives, okay? All right, we got 95 Republicans. The hardcore conservatives are somewhere between 30 and 40, depending on the issue, okay? What I would consider, you know, good conservatives, all right, where we might have differences on a few issues, but you can depend on them on the big issues. We have somewhere between 45 and 50, okay? We don't have 95 conservatives. We just don't have that. So what I need for you guys to do is to help elect other conservatives. Don't beat up on the conservatives you already have. It seems like we shoot each other all the time. Let's make sure that we're electing other conservatives, because right now what has to happen is this conservative group that Geanie talked about and Tan talked about, what we have to be able to do is we have to be able to figure out how to get a few more people with us so that we can get stuff passed that we think is conservative legislation. Or we have to get people with us to help us stop some non-conservative legislation. So, and that requires us to work with other people. I mean, that's just going to happen. So what I would like to see our party do is to say, okay, let's elect some more conservatives. Let's don't beat up and run off the ones that we have, because I do sometimes see that happening. Next slide, please. Oh, this is a good one too, and Dan talked about it a little bit. Water, and really water security, making sure that we have water. We know that in Lewisville, we've been fortunate in a sense that we've never lacked in supply of water, although we pay for that water at not the cheapest rates. What we want to make sure, the main thing is that water is available. Now, like Highland Village, they have their own wells. One of the few cities in the whole state that we have, Pat, 6 wells? 7 wells that they were able to drill their own water wells, which is pretty fascinating. And they pretty well know what their population is going to be, because it's you've kind of built most of the way out, so you know what that's going to be. But one of the things that I saw when HB4 came across my desk is I said, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to read this, because this is important for Texas. I wanted to have the opportunity to do something like the legislatures did in the 50s. Those men and women were transformational. They're the ones that started building those reservoirs back then. They saw the future, right? And we have to be able to do that. And I didn't like everything about it, but I will tell you, I went to the person who's the author of the bill, Chairman Ritter, went down over my questions. He had his expert in there, and they agreed to some changes. In fact, we put an amendment in there to make everything more transparent, that they would have to post on the website how are they spending this money. Now, what they did, in my opinion, is a transformational way in how water will be funded in the future. And that we set up a bank, a state-owned bank, whose only purpose is to be able to provide loans to these municipalities and water systems so that they can get their projects started now and they don't have to raise mine and your water rates to do that. And these are 10-year projects. These don't happen overnight, whether it's building pipelines or a new treatment plant or whatever it happens to be. And it was a way that they could do that without raising our taxes. Now, you know, I didn't necessarily like that we're going to use the money in the rainy day fund for that. But remember, we're not spending that money, okay? That money's going to be paid back and used over and over and over. In fact, I had an amendment that didn't pass, was to, if we couldn't figure out how to fund this thing was so important, that we would take a 2% cut across the budget line. 2 cents out of every dollar. So they figured out how to do it without that, which was fine. But this fall, you're going to vote on an amendment, a constitutional amendment, to approve the setting up the bank and the water fund, and I would recommend that you support that.
Could you say just a little bit on that state bank? Kind of lost order. That's a biggie.
Yeah, and these are what they call they're infrastructure banks. And they're not banks that, you and I put money in. But what happens is the state sets up a bank so that they can take money out of the treasury and invest it in the appropriate manner and loan it out, because you have to be a bank to be able to loan money out. So they will loan money, not necessarily, but could be to the regional water authority that, I think, Bobby, you're involved with that here in this area, right? Okay, so, okay, yeah. And the Upper Trinity is what we're on, right? So they say Trinity wanted a project, okay? They were going to build a pipeline or start on a new reservoir. And they would say, okay, well, this project's going to cost us $300 million, all right? So what this bank would do is it would loan them the money at low rates so that they wouldn't have to raise your taxes right now in order to fund that. And as that came online and there's more population that are paying their water bills, they pay that loan back. And so it's a revolving account.
And the interest goes back to Texas.
Back to the state. That's correct. Yeah, it goes back to Texas. Good question. It goes back to the state of Texas. Absolutely. Absolutely. Next slide, please. Tax relief, we talked a little bit about this. HB 500, $700 million in franchise taxes relief to Texas. We exempt the small business. How many small business owners do we have in here? People that own their own business. Well, we permanently now exempted revenues under $1 million from paying that margin tax. And one of these days, we're going to get rid of that margins tax, because that's nothing but an income tax on small business. We've got to figure out a way to get rid of that. Research and development, we provided tax relief for that. Make sure that Texas businesses are rewarded for their innovation. Now, one of the things that we kept in there that I and others talked against is Texas has these funds that are set up to give out grants and things like that to businesses coming in here, like the motion picture system or the enterprise system. Some of your business may have benefited from that, but I'll tell you, I don't personally think Texas needs to be in the business of picking winners and losers. We do that through our tax policy is how we ought to be doing that. That's the way we do that. We can, listen, if the motion picture industry doesn't want to come here and shoot a motion picture because we're not giving them money, so be it. Most of the time, it's not decent stuff they're doing anyway. And it's temporary jobs. So what we want to do is incentivize them to do it through their tax policy, not through writing them checks out of taxpayers' money. That's my opinion. So we did do some good tax relief. The governor really pushed for that. In fact, he wasn't going to sign the budget until we did it. So I think that helped get it across. Next slide, please. Medicaid reform. Again, this is something that Geanie talked about. I do want to say on HB 7, one of the big challenges that we have is how do we service the mental health? How do we service the mentally ill? And SB 7 was a bill that's going to really transform the way we provide services to the mental health people that use it through state programs. And I worked with Representative Leach on that amendment that Geanie talked about to make sure that Medicaid could not be expanded without legislative approval. We like our current head of Health and Human Services, Dr. Janik, but if he got replaced by someone that was pro-Obamacare, we didn't want them to be able to say okay without our legislative approval. So we did that. And then Senator Nelson authored a bill on addressing fraud, waste, and abuse in our Medicaid system. We believe that there's as much as 25 to 40% of abuse in this system. And we want to make sure that we're getting our dollars, our best efficient dollars use out of that. Next slide, please. Pension reform, increased transparency. You'll be able to better see. Remember, the teacher's pension, part of it's money they put in. And my mom and dad were school teachers. My dad, in fact, he retired and then went back immediately as a steel band director at age 77 years old in Arkansas. So I understand teachers. But part of the money that goes in that fund is mine and your money. It's our taxpayer money. And so you need to see how that's going. So we passed some legislation to make it more transparent so you would have access to that. We updated their system, make sure that promises made are promises keep. Same thing for the employee retirement system of Texas County. In exchange for this, we moved the retirement age a little bit so that they have to work to age 62 if they're a certain age now. And we just think that makes sense. Most of us, this day and time, most people work well past 62 before they retire. So we think that's just getting more in line with the private sector. Next slide, please. Stable funding for transportation. Tan talked about this a little bit as well, and that the last session, we were kind of done in by the second session on getting transportation done because we had one of the senators that didn't want to be quiet. She wanted to talk the whole thing through. on another bill, and so that we ran out of time. So in the third session, we were able to come up with a way to put a down payment, so to speak, on our road system. If we're going to double our population over the next 20 years or so, which is that's what the projections are, we need to make sure that we have the right transportation system. When I'm talking about that, I'm talking about roads, just free public roads, to be able to do that. And in order to do that, we have to provide the funds to do that. And we're going to have tough decisions next time to make on how we continue funding these. Now, the good thing that we have is the person that's head of our Texas Department of Transportation, Phil Wilson, is absolutely a hardcore fiscal conservative. He is going to utilize that money the best we can. But when you're a state as large as we are, it is a lot of roads. Now, the challenge that we have with our rural friends, all right, is that they don't want more road money necessarily spent in the metropolitan areas. However, that's where all the traffic is, okay? You don't need a lot of extra road money in Pampa, Texas, right? You need money, if any of you are on the road today, in the Lewisville area, which we're going to get started on 35 here real quick. But we have to get that figured out. The money needs to go to the most congested areas. That's where we need to make sure that we're spending most of our dollars. And we've made some good progress in doing that. This constitutional amendment will not come up until next November. So November of 14, we'll be talking to you about that before then. But I would encourage that you support that as well. And we did make some really good changes to that at the end of the session. We worked really, really hard on that. I was on the phone, as Lisa will tell you, almost nonstop at the end to try to get the support for that and to get the changes made so that we could support it. One of the things that we did in that was, again, increase the transparency of how all this is going to operate. Next slide, please. Election reform under Geanie's leadership. We did some good things in election. I provided a bill so there's no confusion that if you're a candidate and you're outside the 100-foot marker at a polling place, that you can feel free to have a sign, that you can feel free to conduct campaigning without being abusive. We want to make sure that we protected that most sacred of our rights. That's a free speech right. We also want to make sure that we eliminated or reduce as much as we can the fraud that goes on in write-in ballots. And we passed several bills for that. This one allows the election boards to be able to have different ways to check the signatures on ballots to ensure their security. We also limited the number of ballots that these facilitators can bring and they can collect. So we did some really good work on that. Next slide, please. One of the things that's personally important to me, I serve on the National Board of Directors of the Autism Society. One of our children has a mild form of autism, and one of the weird things about Texas law was that we provided coverage for autism treatment, but we didn't provide coverage for the initial screening to see if you had it or not. So therefore, a lot of kids weren't diagnosed until they got into school, and they made them even further behind, which cost the state more money to try to get them caught up. So we passed a bill that I sponsored, 3276, that provides screening for autism between 18 and 24 months. It's a very simple process. If you have an insurance plan, they will now be covering this. It's very simple. It's not expensive at all. So we provided that. And what we know that will do, because other states have done it, is what it will do is it will make the long-term cost to the state less. Because you get them into treatment early, they get more productive early, and therefore they can become productive, producing citizens, and not on the burden of the state as they get older. We also passed Senate Bill 1484 that Barry Gonzalez and I sponsored in the House, sponsored by Senator Watson in the Senate, that makes sure that you can still get treatment after age 10, because the prior law cut it off at age 10, which doesn't really make any sense. So we did some really good things there that I believe will save taxpayers money in the long run. Next slide, please. Here's some of the, one of the things I learned down there is that even though you can't get your bills passed that you want passed, because it's very hard to do that, is what you can do is you can amend bills on the floor. So if I had a bill that didn't get through, I could transfer that to an amendment, try to put it onto something and get a vote on it. HB 4, I made sure that I offered an amendment, it was passed, that we had the board that would make sure that information was online. And we were able to do that. Also, we established the intent was that the money was to be used for the water fund and nothing else, right? That the money that we allocated was not going to be used for any crazy thing. Because you know what can happen. It gets over there and they'll say, well, we watered that the other day, so now it's part of the water plan, right? So we want to make sure that doesn't happen. HB 5, I also offered an amendment that was passed that allows, I heard from special ed teachers, that says, look, you got special ed kids that are taking the same type test that the regular kids are taking, and the school's being scored on that. We need to have specialized, individualized tests for special ed children that test them where they are. And so now, Lewisville has the right to get with the State of Education Department and come up with their own test. They have the right to do that. And we were able to get that amendment passed into HB 5. Making sure that we like tax credits, but we don't want double dipping. And you know, people will take everything that you give us and want to make sure it was fair. And then we talked about election judges. We wanted to make sure that the proper procedure was in place for appointing election judges at polling places. There were some technicalities in that need to be worked out. Next slide, please. I was an amendment person. That's my deal, right? One of the things that a constituent came to me about is that in an Orthodox Jewish marriage, there's a certain amount of time that you have once you get your marriage license to get married. Well, for the Orthodox Jewish faith, and I don't understand all this, they needed more time because of the way their families work and the way they have to go back and forth and all that. So we extended the time that you have from the time you get your license to be able to get married, and it helped them a lot. The governor signed that bill. And then also in Texas, we live in one. They have these special utility districts, which are not inside of any city, but they're like a development, like Castle Hills, where we live. And even though we eventually will be part of Lewisville, right now we're not part of the city limits. So we need to figure out how we get police protection, as Lewisville provides for us now, but some areas didn't have that. So it allowed them to be able to, and I worked with Commissioner Martin on this, to be able to get the county to enforce traffic laws in those areas. And I think that'll be really good because they're, you know, essentially they're an unregulated area right now. We need to make sure that the common traffic laws that we're all used to are enforced there. And then the transportation study, we wanted to, the transportation bill, I wanted to make sure that the funding methods were permissible and it was the right way to use the Economic Stabilization Fund. I wanted to do a study on what should we be using this fund for, what shouldn't we be using it for. That's our rainy day fund. And we also, this is the big bill that we were able, the big amendment that we were able to work on, is that if you took money out of the rainy day fund, there had to be a floor in there, so that if we got below that floor, the money didn't go anywhere else until it replenished the rainy day fund. And that's something that we worked on hard the last couple of weeks to get done, and we were able to get that done, so we were excited about that. Next slide, please. Now, not everything's perfect. So we didn't get everything passed. All my bills were good. Why they didn't get passed, I don't know. This first bill is an interesting one. I actually got some pushback from people, you know, on the right, which I consider myself on. I had a lady come to me that said, hey, my son is mentally ill. He's doing okay now, but when he is not doing well, he has these thoughts of causing harm to himself or others. So can he put himself on a list that says, don't sell me a firearm? Voluntarily, can he do that? And so we put up legislation that didn't end up making it through because there was, you know, pushback on that. So we just need more education on that and make sure that we're doing what the people want. But I still think in my heart of hearts that makes sense. Now, we don't want to give, you know, the government an inch and they take a mile. That's what we're always afraid of. But if, I don't know if any of you, and I don't ever watch Pierce Morgan on CNN, that just makes me puke. But I did watch Rick Warren and his wife last night on that interview. If you have the time to watch that, the guy that wrote the book, The Purpose-Driven Life, and you know, his son that committed suicide, bought a gun illegally over the internet, The person obviously should be, there was a lot of things that shouldn't have happened. There was nothing wrong with, the gun scenario. But again, it may be a situation where if he had voluntarily said, hey, I know that I go up and down, so maybe I should do something. I don't know if that would have helped or not. And I'm not sure it's the right answer, but I do think we ought to think about it. Other things that we're working on here that's really important is the landfill. I had a bill that the city of Lewisville, the city of Carrollton, we had it. It was going to be perfect. And for whatever reason, the chairperson of that particular committee decided that she was not going to vote that out of committee. Now, that wasn't Geanie Morrison. Okay, so make sure, even though I said she, it wasn't her. Even though I had 8 out of 9 votes on that committee wanting to vote out, just did not do it. So we're still working on that. We're working on with the TCEQ to make sure that they can't expand a landfill in an urban area without getting local approval. And I know that Leonard and the city of Lewisville also is working on that. So we tried to get it done legislatively, couldn't quite get it done. Eliminated it. These are just some other things. And you can look on my website, those I won't go over all of those, but it's pretty interesting stuff. Next slide, please. District activity, we've talked about the landfill, we're still working on that. I want to talk about the next one just for a second. I want you to understand. I'm a small business owner, so I understand business. I'm a pro-business owner. I enjoy a glass from the fruit of the vine. Okay, so I'm not anti having spirits. But when these stores come into a city and they're right across the street from a daycare or a church or right down the street from a school, we need to be smart about that. And we want those owners to come sit down with those community leaders and talk about that. Well, this one didn't. So we exercised this, actually not very much on my part, but the citizens in that area, down in the Carrollton area, in Hebron, exercised their right, and I was so proud of them because they went through the process of filing an objection. They went to the district court, and they spoke at the district court. The district court ruled in their favor. This guy decided he would appeal it, which was his legal right. So they went back, spoke again, and the district court again ruled in their favor. Then he thought he was going to pull that license and then try to put another one in under a different type of name, and I called the general counsel for the TABC, Texas Alcohol Beverage Commission, and they said that's not going to happen. So they ended up opposing it. And once the people that license it oppose it, probably not going to happen. So this was a great example of citizens getting together and utilizing their constitutional rights. And I was proud of them for doing that. One of the cool things you do too is congratulatory resolutions. This young man right here out of Hebron High School had a perfect score on the SAT. And I had 2 of those in my day. Can you imagine a perfect score? I mean, I have a hard time, SAT sometimes, I get that mixed up. So it's incredible. The Lewisville High School softball team state championship, that was awesome. The girls just did awesome on that, so we were able to get them congratulations. 7 of the Hebron cheerleaders were All-American. I sent out, this is interesting because I did it when I was sitting at my desk. I had 5,000 graduates in my district. I signed 5,000 letters that hopefully got put in their graduation packets. But it's a cool thing to be able to do that, just to be honored. We have a huge number of graduates that come from the private schools and the public schools. So we love doing those types of things. If you have something that you think is cool, that maybe your parents celebrating their 100th birthday or somebody's 50th anniversary, let my office know that. We'll get a resolution done for them. I had my grandson be a mascot for the day. He was 2 years old. And that's in the record forever, right? So it's kind of a cool thing to do. We can fly a flag, a Texas flag over the Capitol and present that to you. Those are kind of fun things to be able to do. And Ben loves taking care of all of those. He does a good job. Next slide, please. Hopefully we kept you informed, that you enjoyed getting our capital comments that we sent out. Ben and his team, over 1,700 emails. We actually responded to all of it. Some of them we could combine, so don't think we didn't respond to 300. We responded to everybody. We sent out, had over 125 people come to the office, 9 editions of our capital comments. We also send out a newsletter, a paper newsletter at the end, which all of you should have received. If not, we have other copies back there. And we try to keep, I'm not really a Facebook person. I never was on Facebook. I didn't really want to know what everybody else was thinking or what I was thinking, but when we started this business, we got on Facebook. Lisa taught me a little bit on it, and so we try to keep that up to date, and hopefully it's helpful for you. It is very good to be able to definitely sign some of those letters, if you can imagine. It was a lot to do. Next slide, please. I was honored, and thank Geanie again for being a courageous conservative. I was also named the most valuable player of the 2013 freshman class by Capital Insider. Earned a top conservative rating from Texas Eagle Forum, received a perfect score from Texas Right to Life. So I will just tell you, as I close up, and I'm going to bring Representative Fallon up here to speak for just a couple minutes. In fact, if you want to come on down. You know, I'm a business person, and I love to get into the numbers and the details. As Tan told you, I sat in all the appropriation committee meetings, even when I wasn't on the committee, because I love learning that stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm a dad, and I'm a Christian, and I believe life starts at conception. And if we never did anything else, this is my opinion, it doesn't have to be yours. If I never did anything else, if I never got reelected, but we were able to pass a bill that saved babies after 20 weeks, it's worth it. I stayed down there at Chairman Cook's committee meeting the first time. I was there when he did it the second time. Lisa came down, she helped organize a lot of things, but we did some good work. And not only did we save some babies, we helped some ladies. Because even when you make that decision, okay, and you can still do it legally prior to 20 weeks. When you make that decision, we want to make sure that if you do make that decision, that you're going to have that taken care of in a place that meets health standards. And it's not done by somebody who was an anesthesiologist yesterday and is now performing abortion tomorrow. We want to make sure that they have admitting privileges. We want to make sure that their clinics are up to standard. And you know what? Here's what I said, look, I know they make money off this, right? And so don't tell me you can't afford to update your clinic, because you can do that. And they will either get them updated or they'll shut them down. It's their choice. And I was so proud of Representative Laubenberg, Representative Burkett, and Senator Hager, and all the people that supported that we were able to get this thing done. And here's the reason. Because when I sat in those meetings, I sat in those hearings, and there were people testifying that says, oh, it's just a glob of cells, okay? Why are you going to make me, why can't I make my own choice on this glob of cells? Well, I told you that our oldest son's wife was pregnant again. And this August, just a few weeks ago, she went in for her 20-week interesting sonogram, so they could tell the sex of it. And this is James. And you can't see it very well, but his arms are on top of his head, his feet, his face is like he's looking right at us. If that's a glob of cells, then I don't know what in the world people are talking about. That is who we saved for Texas. Next slide. So you can get in touch with us at these offices. We have information, you can reach us. But one of the cool things about getting in this business is that I started campaigning a couple years ago, and I'd run into this guy who was this crazy man, that would get up and talk, and it would get me so motivated, and I wanted to go Iwo Jima or something. I mean, it was just incredible, and so I got to know Pat Fallon. And Pat's like me. He wasn't born in Texas, but we got here as fast as we could. Pat's a former Marine, went to Notre Dame, was on the national championship team there, and his wonderful wife Susan, 2 little boys. And Pat is one of those core conservative people that you can depend on every single time to vote in a conservative manner. Doesn't mean you'll always agree with him, but he'll be voting his conservative principles. And I wanted you to get to know him a little bit better, so he's going to say a few words.
Well, folks, I've been looking forward to this all day.
Thank you very much for coming. Well, Ron, first of all, I don't think it's that hard for you to imagine, for me to see that you can't imagine a perfect score on the SAT because you are from Arkansas. Ron and I are both freshmen, legislators, and we have to be honest, when we get down there, it's rather intimidating. You're in a building that's 130 years old, it's 308 feet tall, and on the House floor when we're in session, the original battle flag from the Battle of San Jacinto hangs over the dais. And we kept asking each other in November when we went down for orientation, and then in January when we got there, we wandered the halls and think, Ron, how the heck did we get here? How we got there? And then after one regular session and 3 special sessions, we've been asking, how the hell did those other 448 get there? But folks, let's be very succinct about this. There's a battle going on in this country. And I'm not talking about conflict in Iraq or war in Afghanistan. I'm not talking about a battle that happens on a continent half a world away. I'm talking about a battle here in our country that's not only being fought in Washington, D.C., but in our courts, and in city halls, and on school boards, and in the hearts and minds of our fellow citizens in the media and in state legislatures across the country. So it's a battle for our very freedoms, for the way that we want to live our lives, and for the way that we want to run our businesses. And it's an open question as to whether or not we'll be able to worship the Almighty to the dictates of our own conscience. That's the battle that I'm talking about. Now, we do things differently in Texas. We're not California. We're not New York. And we're not Illinois. So who you decide to send to Austin is of vital import. The way we do things in Texas, we have essentially 26 million people every other year decide to send a board of directors, 181 members, 150 in the House, 31 in the Senate, to decide how to spend $195 billion with a B dollars. $195 billion. 26 million Americans. But it's not just the 26 million Texans, because if you consider over the last 5 years that Texas has created more new jobs than the other 49 states combined, your decision just doesn't affect Texas, it affects the United States. Because where would we have been had it not been for Texas when we took that economic downturn in 2008 and 2009? That recession would have been a depression. We're doing things the right way. The rest of the country is looking towards us. So who you send is important. And I remember meeting a guy that I really didn't know that was a political unknown 2 years ago, and he said a lot of the right things. He reminded me a lot of Tan Parker, and that was Ron Simmons. And I loved what he said. And he asked if I would help him out. And I said, Ron, I'm running my own race. But I imparted it any kind of help that I could have given him. And now, after having served with him in one regular and 3 special sessions, I got to tell you, he exceeded even my highest expectations. Because when the cameras are off and the microphones have long been put away, Ron's the same guy he is when he's speaking in front of you at a town hall. I mean, it can't be understated. Tan mentioned it before, but when you go to every single appropriations committee meeting and you're not on the appropriations committee, that speaks volumes. And I'm glad that he got MVP in the freshman class, because I really do truly think he was. And there's a lot of pressure on us. Because what I did notice about the lobbyists and the special interests in Austin, there really isn't anybody down there that's hired to tell us, yes, Representative, could you please not spend the taxpayer money unwisely? Can you really please make sure you squeeze every little cent out of that dollar for the taxpayers in Texas? Because they're footing this bill. That lobbyist doesn't exist, only in our imaginations. So you have to stand strong. And it's been an honor to do that for Ron. And I just want to share with you, because we do very noble things, and then we do very petty things on the House floor, as Representative Ron can attest to, and Geanie Morrison as well. And the funniest moment that we had on the House floor, I just want to share it with you, was there's a member of the House, his name's Lomberg, and he is one of those 3 ticks left of Trotsky folks. I mean, Trotsky would say, Lon, you're too darn liberal.
Anyhow, Lon Burns he's a white Democrat from Fort Worth, and he wanted to rename a part of, get this, the Purple Heart Expressway. That's what it's named now. He wanted to rename 10 miles of it the Cesar Chavez Highway, because he's trying to pander to his new changing demographic, as if that's going to make them vote for him. He didn't consult the mayor of Fort Worth. He didn't consult his other state reps. It was not a local matter. And quite honestly, personally, for me, I'm not too thrilled about it because Nino Aquino is a personal political hero of mine who was imprisoned by the Marcos regime. Well, in 1977, Cesar Chavez went to the Philippines to praise the Marcos regime. While Nino Aquino was in prison 6 years later, that regime killed Nino Aquino. So I don't want to rename Cesar Chavez Highway. So it was supposed to be a local bill, and I fought that, and many members of the conservative delegation in North Texas fought it, Ron being amongst them, and the Tarrant County fellows as well. So there was literally a scrum on the House floor. And we're kind of moving, arguing back and forth with a lot of the Democrats, explaining why we don't like this, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one of our members of the Republican delegation, our youngest member, 29-year-old fellow named Jonathan Stickland. And Jonathan's kind of a big bone fellow. And he was arguing, he was in the middle of the scrum. And then I got an idea, and I went over to my desk mate, Representative Giovanni Capriglione, and I said, Gio, they're saying that race is involved in this? That's a bunch of hooey. Why don't we rename that 10-mile stretch after a Hispanic member of the military that won the Medal of Honor? Ha! And Gio says to me, oh, no, Pat. Jonathan's got a much better idea. And I look over at Jonathan, and he's holding in his hand an amendment that he had actually gotten drafted on the House floor. And he's holding it like this, and he's talking to the other Democrats. And I said, what? He said, no. Stick's got a better amendment. I said, what is it? And he says, go over and ask him. And I said, Stick, do you really have an amendment? He was going to rename it the Jesus Christ Highway. I said, did you really get that drafted? He said, yeah. He says, you know why, Pat? I said, why? He said, because in Texas, even liberals are afraid to vote against Jesus. Thank you very much. Oh, that was awesome. Well, we're going to wrap it up here. I've got some questions that y'all turned in, but also, if you didn't turn in a question, you want to ask one, just come to the mic here and be happy to answer questions. I can stay here as long as anybody wants. The first question is, how engaged will Representative Simmons be in the Article 5 U.S. Constitution approach to amend the Constitution and blunt the federal government's power to grab our country that we face today? And this is kind of referenced in the book, The Liberty Amendments by Mark Levin. And Article 5 allows with 2/3 of the state legislatures agreeing to it, allows for there to be a convention that you could come and offer amendments to the Constitution. And first of all, I want to tell you that we need to keep every tool in our tool chest and be able to utilize it to protect this country. Now, the challenge that you have is that you better know what you're doing, because sometimes the dog that you have is better than the dog that's outside. And so when you can get there, and there could be amendments that we don't want that could pass. So we just need to be careful about that. I think there's a way to do it, and I think we ought to keep those options on the table for sure. But the challenge is that so far the U.S. Congress has not acknowledged the fact that other state legislatures have sent in saying, hey, we need to consider this. And so I am in favor of supporting having the ability to do that. I just want to make sure, and it needs to be smarter people than me, or at least I need to study it some more, really understand what that means. And I will commit to you to make sure that I am up to date on that. And if you have information that you can provide, please feel free to do so. Let's see here. The next question is, what was your biggest challenge as you began your first session? It's interesting. I think the biggest challenge for me, was that every day was new. If you'd been there before, you kind of thought, okay, this is how this will go, right? For me, I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, and I dare not. So I was always afraid I was going to miss something. So I'd sit there listening, and at the first of the session, you can't pass any bills for 60 days. In fact, you can't even present it to the House floor for 60 days. So the first 60 days is resolution after resolution, congratulating grandma and grandpa and all. And so
what you're doing then is you're working behind the scenes. That's all the stuff that you're doing. But I didn't know a lot of that type of stuff. And then the other thing that I learned, the biggest thing that I learned, and this is a good thing for y'all, is that it's hard to get something passed. I had this autism bill that was really important to me. I worked hard for it. I took it through the insurance committee. Chairman Smithy, who's a dear, dear man, heard it. His whole committee heard it. They passed it out. I got a vote on the House floor. I got it. It was, I think there was one person voting against something. Okay, man, I am done. This ain't even that hard, right? I got this down. So it goes over to the Senate, and I surely think that they must know that we passed it 149-1, so you'll just pass this on through. Well, there's an ending time period of which you can pass, a bill can pass out of committee. And it's a week or two before the end of the session, something like that. So it comes up that day, and my bill hadn't passed out of committee in the Senate. And so I go over to the Senate floor, which they kind of look scoundrelly at you for some lowly freshman representative coming over there. So I go to the floor, and Senator Dooley had sponsored my bill over in the Senate, and I said, Senator Dooley, what happened? And he said, well, I don't think I had support on the committee. I said, I thought different things, but I said, I believe that we do. And he said, if you can get Senator Duncan, who I didn't know, to have another committee hearing today on this bill, then I'm happy to present it. So I go to Senator Duncan. I mean, this tells me that I should have met him earlier, right? And I introduce myself. He looks at me like, who are you? Because we can go on the Senate floor. We can walk right up to their desk, okay? So I would just sit there. It wouldn't bother me. I'd stay there all night if I needed to for this. So I said, Senator Duncan, this is a really important bill. Didn't get heard in your committee. He said, well, I heard all the bills that had Senate sponsors. I said, no, this one didn't. He said, well, I don't think you have the votes. He said, I'll tell you what, though. If you will come back to me and you'll give me the names of 5 of my committee members that will vote for this, then I will have a hearing for you tonight, which he didn't have to do. Totally his discretion. So I took Senator Nelson, said, Senator Nelson, I need your help. So she helped me work the committee. I got 5 people to say yes. They had a hearing that night, 7:30 that night, to hear this one bill. And one of my yeses wasn't there. And so we get down to the votes. Now, Senator Duncan, who's the chairman, he wasn't one of the yeses. I got the 4, and he voted yes. And I learned, though, that you better work that thing all the way through to the end, and also to the governor's office, because the governor, could have vetoed it. So that's what I really learned. Let's see here. Back to that. What was the biggest challenge? Okay, we saw that one already. Stronger legislation for drivers who use phones and texting. Now, we had that bill come up. Texting and driving. Representative Craddock brings it up every time. And it's just one of those things, whether or not you want more government regulation or you don't. Now, texting and driving is not good, okay? And Lisa reminds me of that if she catches me doing it. It's not good and it's dangerous. There is no question about it. The question is, should we legislate that? And so far, the majority of Texans, through their representatives, have said no, that we shouldn't legislate that. And Speaker Craddock is not very happy about that, but said that's what the majority, and I voted no on that particular bill. And you can look it up. I struggled with it. And I really did struggle with it because I don't want my kids texting, and I would feel awful if I knew somebody that law would have helped. However, I just don't know if that's the role of the state. So that's the question. And you know what? Here's the deal. Conservatives can be at different positions on that issue. It's okay. It doesn't mean you're not conservative and I am, or I am and you're not. It's okay. We can be at different sides of the deal on that. Republican caucus performed, it's my first session, so it's hard for me to tell. I thought we performed okay, although we're certainly a caucus that is not all on the same page on some of the issues. so you'd have some split in the caucus, but I thought it performed pretty well. I don't know any bill on casualty insurance or annuities. I don't remember anything specifically coming up this time in that. We are trying to do some stuff with the TWIA, the windstorm. It's not hurt us as much, but down on the coast, in fact, there's a special select committee that's in about that. The water bill will be funded properly if we pass the constitutional amendment this time. Somebody asked a question for that. And one of the cool things that happened in the education bill is that we're going to be able to have people that are experts in their vocation. Okay, say that they don't have a teaching certificate, but they're an expert they're an electrician. Well, they can come in now and teach a class on the electrician class, right? Where they couldn't do that before for those people that are on the path for vocation as opposed to college. And I think that's awesome. Public funds do currently go to charter schools because they're overseen by the state as well. So they do get not as much per student as regular public schools get, but they do get some public funds. And funding for Medicaid, we haven't changed our funding for Medicaid other than what just went along through increased enrollment. We did not participate in the Obama increased funding for Medicaid, as we talked about earlier. Concealed carry on college campuses. Maybe we ought to work on getting the Navy shipyard first, right? Can you imagine how many of those expert marksmen couldn't carry a gun and allow 12 people to die because of that? I mean, and this guy was mentally ill as well. And, I mean, it's a big issue, all right? But the issue is never not letting law-abiding, neurotypical citizens. It's never restricting them. That shouldn't be the issue. College campuses, we had the bill come up before the committee that I was on. Just be honest with you, and I thought our chairman did a good job. I think he was under pressure probably by his caucus because he was a Democrat chairman to not let that bill out. So that bill got killed in committee. But we will go at it again, just like we will open carry. We'll go at that one again as well. And hopefully we'll be able to get that done. Red light cameras, man, I need to get those taken out too. I don't like those either. Of course, the cities love them probably because it probably does create some revenue. And I will tell you, honestly speaking, though, it does change my habits sometimes, okay? Especially the turning right on red, coming to a full stop and right on red. But I don't remember that there may have been legislation for that, but it didn't get all the way through if there was. The most important thing you feel accomplished this session, I think I went over that on the very last slide. Steps taken to remove Speaker Strauss. You know, the way I will tell you that Speaker Strauss was very kind to me. Okay, I didn't have any personal issues with him at all. That he and I agree on everything. Absolutely not. But I'm not going to agree with everybody on. I'm not ever going to agree with everything with anybody. But the way the scenario works is that you're elected by the members there, and unless you have 76 people that are more conservative and want a more conservative speaker, that's not going to happen, all right? And so if people want that to change, then they have to have more conservative people elected if that's what they want. I don't feel like, for me personally, that he kept any of my legislation from getting through. I wasn't on the inside enough at that level to know, how they move the legislation around. But I think, no matter who's speaker, if we've got a committee group of conservatives that's 40, 50 people, I think we can get some things done if we work together. We need to be able to work as a coalition to be able to get stuff done. I think that we can do that no matter who's speaker. The speaker's always going to change. There's going to be turnover in the speakers. We turn over the lieutenant governor. That's going to happen. We can get things done, and we cannot use that as an excuse not to do what we're supposed to do. So, yes, sir. And that's something that we can look at doing is in the rules, because what he's talking about is the way this works is that the first day we get there, we have to adopt the House rules. And those are, it's actually a big thick book now, and there's rarely changes made to it. But one of the things that's included in there is how they elect chairmen of committee, how they elect speakers of the House, and all the other officers, so to speak, of the House. And one of the things that could happen if you said, maybe what we want to do is have a term limit or something on the number of terms that a speaker could serve. A lot of states do that, and then you would have turnover of all the chairmen and all that type of stuff. There's all different types of things that can be looked at, but even in that, you got to have 76 votes. You have to have 76 votes to be able to make those changes. And so I will tell you, there's a couple of things you can look at the way you look at some of this stuff in general. And I'll close here unless somebody has other questions. And that is, and there's nothing wrong with this. You can come down there and be a blocker, okay? Somebody that's going to say no to everything, pretty much. And it's okay to do that if that's what you want to do. Or you can come down there and say, hey, here's my value system. I'm not ever going to give up on that value system. It's my beliefs, and I think you all know what they are. My core conservative beliefs. I'm going to vote along those lines every time. I don't care if somebody on the right doesn't like it or the left doesn't like it. I'm going to do that, okay? But I want to get positive things done for Texas. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to not just say no. I'm going to say no, but let's try this. Okay? Let's look for solutions. Look, we can't just say no to the roads. We have to have a solution for roads. We can't just say no to water. We have to have a solution for water. All right? And so we need to do it in a conservative way, but we have to have a solution. And we need more people that are willing to come up with conservative solutions. And sometimes that solution is keep the government out of it, right? Like in the licensing things, It's amazing what Texas wants to license. And the people that want to license them are usually the people that are already in that business, because they want to stay in it but don't want to let anybody else in. That's what happens. We need to only license things that affect the health and safety of people. If it doesn't affect the health and safety, we need to let the free market take it. Do you have a question?
Real quick, I was actually just down there for HB2 a lot, and I just wanted to say that Ron was fantastic down there, and Lisa was the best dressed pro-life woman there by far. Huge blessing for all of us that were activists down there. I hid out in his office while they were shouting "Hail Satan" at us a little bit. And actually, he took I doubt you have it, the poem you read. For pro-life debates, and for most of the session, freshmen are not supposed to speak. They really just, there's a certain group of Republicans that speak on that. But Ron actually got up during the closing statements and made a wonderful speech. I was in there in David Simpson's office, and Mama C was there, and she was very proud of you, which always tells me which is always a good sign. And so just that he was willing to stand up and really kind of put himself out there. At Pro-Life Texas, we've honored you as one of our fighting freshmen, and at one point you obviously will be our legislator of the week for Pro-Life. Thank you very much for all of your work.
Jason, I really appreciate that. Thank you all so much for coming. It's been an absolute honor to serve. It really has been an honor to serve. I'm honored to be able to be involved in the public policy discussions in Texas. I hope to be able to go back and serve again. I don't have an opponent yet, so let's make sure that doesn't happen. Okay, let's keep the opponent stuff down. It'd be nice to go through a cycle without having to do that. But I want you to know that I'm available to you. And if we need to visit on something, you just get in touch with Mark at the office, or if I'm in Austin, get in touch with Ben. If you have a group that you'd like me to come talk to, I'm happy to come talk to school groups. I'm happy to come talk to church groups. Whatever it is that you have, I'm happy to come visit with them. Because one of the things I want to make sure that we're doing, that this office is communicating to you about what goes on in your state. All right? Because you know what? It's not my money, it's not my office, it's y'all's. All right? And the reason I got into this, because it's 25 years as a business person, it's 33 years in helping raise a family. That experience is what we brought to the table. And it was just time. Finally said, quit complaining about it and do something about it. Well, it is an absolute honor. There's only been 6,000 people in the history of Texas that have served in that legislature. and only 40 some odd from Denton County. And I'm proud to be one of those. I'm proud to represent you. If I can serve you in any way, please let me know. Thank you for coming tonight.